There's a particular kind of silence that comes after you've been betrayed by someone you loved completely. Not the silence of a quiet room. Not the silence of a peaceful morning. The silence of a man sitting in his truck in a driveway, staring at a television screen through a living room window, watching his son kiss his ex-wife in front of a live studio audience while the check he wrote 3 weeks ago was probably still warm. That kind of silence. My name is Gerald Patton. I'm 58 years old. I spend my mornings drinking black coffee on a back porch in Knoxville, Tennessee, watching my bird feeders like they owe me something. I coach junior varsity football on Tuesday evenings because I'm the kind of man who still believes 17-year-olds can be shaped into something worth keeping. I drive a 2009 Ford F-150 with 214,000 miles on it, and I will drive it until one of us dies. I am not a wealthy man. Not in the way people mean when they say wealthy, but I spent 34 years as a civil engineer. I kept my head down. I never bought anything I couldn't pay for. And by the time I turned 56, I had saved $310,000 in a money market account that I'd been planning to use for one thing and one thing only: retirement. Then my son Marcus called me from Atlanta on a Tuesday in September and said he needed help, and I did what fathers do. I listened. Welcome to Dad's True Revenge. Get comfortable. This one is going to take a few turns. Drop a comment and subscribe before you forget. I promise you'll want to be here when this comes back around. Let me tell you about Marcus first, because Marcus Patton was the thing I was most proud of in this world. And I want you to understand what that means before I tell you what he did, because the size of the pride matters. It determines the size of the wound. I raised Marcus mostly alone after his mother Diane, and I divorced in 2009. He was 16. It was not a clean divorce. Diane had met someone at her accounting firm, a man named Robert Stills, and by the time I found out, the relationship was apparently already a year old. I won't spend time on that. I made peace with Diane's choices a long time ago. Some things you release, not because they stop hurting, but because carrying them costs more than you have to spend. What I will tell you is that Marcus took the divorce hard in the way teenage boys take those things sideways. He didn't cry, he got quiet. He channeled it into football, into school, into a specific kind of focused ambition that I recognized and respected because it looked exactly like mine. He went to Georgia Tech on a partial scholarship. He got his MBA at 27. By 32, he was working in real estate development in Atlanta, managing mid-size commercial projects, making good money, building a life I could point to. He called me every Sunday. Not every other Sunday, not most Sundays. Every Sunday at 6 p.m., without fail, like clockwork. Like a man who understood that consistency was a form of love. I am telling you all of this so you understand. Marcus was not a stranger who shared my last name. Marcus was my person. My built from the ground up every Sunday at 6, proudest thing I ever made person. Which is why on that Tuesday in September, when he called and told me he needed $200,000 for a down payment on a house, I did not hesitate for long. Here is what he told me. He'd found a property in Buckhead, a neighborhood in Atlanta, the kind where the houses have names instead of street numbers. 4 bedrooms, a yard, a finished basement. He was planning to propose to his girlfriend, a woman named Sasha, and he wanted them to have a real home, not another apartment. His project financing had hit a temporary wall. A deal he was waiting on had been delayed by 30 days. A cash flow issue, not a solvency issue. He just needed a bridge. I'll have it back to you by December, Dad, he said. I just don't want to lose this house. I asked him 3 questions. Is this a sure thing? Yes, sir. You've looked at the numbers? Backward and forward. You need this from me specifically, not a bank? He paused here, just a half second, but I caught it. Banks take too long, he said. I'll miss the closing window. I sat with it for a day. I called my accountant, Louise, who has managed my finances since 2004 and has the no-nonsense energy of someone who was born knowing the prime rate. She told me to ask for a promissory note. I called Marcus back and asked for a promissory note. He said, of course, absolutely. He'd have something drawn up. The note arrived by email 3 days later. It looked right. Clean language, clear repayment schedule, December 31st deadline. I wired $200,000 on a Thursday morning at 9:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I sat in my home office staring at the confirmation screen for 4 full minutes, doing the math on what I had left, making sure I could still be okay if December came and went slowly. I could. Barely, but I could. I sent Marcus a text. Done. December. I love you, son. He replied, You're the best man I know. I mean it. I put the phone down, went to the back porch, drank my coffee, watched the bird feeders. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in that same chair watching the late news when my neighbor Cheryl called. Cheryl Boudreau lives next door and has the particular gift of knowing things before they should be knowable. She once told me a thunderstorm was coming 2 hours before the weather app did, and she was right. I picked up the phone expecting gossip about the neighborhood association. Gerald, she said, are you watching Channel 4? I was not watching Channel 4. Turn it on, she said. Her voice had the specific texture of a woman who is trying to deliver news carefully and failing. I picked up the remote. Channel 4 Inches Knoxville carries syndicated Atlanta programming on weekend evenings. Some lifestyle show, the kind with a studio audience and a host who laughs with her whole body. I'd seen it in passing before. What was on the screen was a segment called Love Stories, Real Proposals from Real People. What was in the segment was my son Marcus, in a navy suit I didn't recognize, down on one knee. The woman he was proposing to was not named Sasha. The woman he was proposing to was Diane, my ex-wife, his mother. I want to be precise about the next 90 seconds, because I think about them often. I did not drop the phone. I did not stand up from the chair. I sat very still and watched my son slide a ring onto his mother's finger, watched the studio audience applaud, watched the host press both hands to her face in the universal performance of joyful surprise. I sat there and I thought, well, there it is. Cheryl was still on the line. I could hear her breathing. I see it, I said. Gerald, thank you for calling, Cheryl. I hung up. If you've been watching for a while and you want stories like this to keep coming, hit that subscribe button and the like button while you're here. It genuinely helps. Okay, back to it. Let me tell you what I knew and when I knew it, because the timeline matters. I knew Marcus and Diane had maintained a relationship after the divorce. Of course they had. She was his mother. I never asked him to choose, and I never would. Whatever my feelings about Diane's choices in 2009, she was still his mother, still the woman who raised him alongside me, still the person whose laugh he had and whose stubbornness he definitely had. What I did not know, what nobody told me, was that Diane and Robert Stills had themselves divorced in 2019, quietly, apparently. No announcement, no mutual friends reaching out. It was simply not information that traveled to me, which in retrospect I should have understood meant it was being kept from me. I also did not know, and I am going to need you to sit with this for a moment, that Marcus and Diane had apparently been in a romantic relationship since sometime in late 2022. His mother, his biological mother, I want to be fair here, because fairness is the only thing I know how to give to a situation this specific. They are not blood related in the traditional sense. Diane is Marcus's mother by adoption. We adopted Marcus at 3 days old. It is the thing we were most united about in our entire marriage, the decision that cost the most and meant the most, the thing I would make again 1,000 times. Marcus knows this. He is known since he was 7 years old. Diane told him herself, gently, completely, in the living room on Maple Ridge Drive in what I still consider one of the finest moments of her life. So there is no biological barrier. I know that. I understand that. What there remains, is a father who raised this man from 3 days old, who taught him to throw a spiral at age 6, who drove him to 4 a.m. travel baseball tournaments in February, who stayed up until 2 a.m. with a red pen marking up his Georgia Tech application essays and then pretended not to cry when the acceptance letter arrived. What there is $200,000 wired on a Thursday morning at 9:17 a.m. for a house that I now strongly suspected was not for a woman named Sasha. I did not sleep that night. I did not call Marcus. I sat on my back porch until 4 a.m., listening to Knoxville be quiet, watching one lonely bird at the feeder who also apparently had nowhere to be, and I thought very carefully about what I actually knew versus what I assumed, because those are two different things, and at 58 years old, I have enough scars from collapsing those two categories to know better. What I knew? Marcus had proposed to Diane on television. What I did not yet know whether the $200,000 had anything to do with it. That was the question that kept me in the chair until the sky turned gray. Because if Marcus genuinely needed the money for a house, and the relationship with Diane was a separate development that he simply hadn't told me about yet that was a painful conversation, but it was survivable, but if the house was for Diane, if the proposal was already planned when he called me, if my son had looked his father in the eye and asked for retirement money and said it was for a woman named Sasha, that was a different thing entirely. I decided I needed to know which one it was before I did anything. At 6 a.m., I called my accountant Louise and asked her to quietly look into the property. Address, deed, closing date, names on the title. She called me back at 10:30 a.m. The property had closed. It was in Buckhead, as described. The names on the deed were Marcus Gerald Patton and Diane Elaine Patton. She had taken his last name. Or rather, she had taken back the name she gave up in 2009. Louise read me the closing date. It was 6 days after I wired the money. I thanked her. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment. Then I called my attorney. His name is Ray Caldwell. He has handled my affairs for 11 years. He is the kind of lawyer who listens more than he talks, and when he does talk, every word is load-bearing. I explained the situation, all of it. The call, the promissory note, the wire, the television segment, the deed. He was quiet for a moment. The note is enforceable, he said. December 31st deadline is clean. If he doesn't pay, you have legal standing. That's not the primary concern right now, I said. Another beat of quiet. Then, no, I imagine it isn't. I want to understand my options, I said. Not for the money, for the conversation. He understood. That's the thing about a good lawyer. He gave me what I needed and told me to call him when I was ready to move. I called Marcus at noon. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was warm, slightly careful, the way a voice gets when it knows something is coming but hasn't confirmed it yet. Hey, Dad. Hey, son. I kept my voice even. I saw the news. A pause. Not long, but complete. I was going to call you, he said. When? Another pause. Soon. Before or after December 31st? He exhaled. The long exhale of a man who has been rehearsing a conversation and just realized the rehearsal wasn't sufficient. Dad, I know how this looks. Walk me through it, I said. Not how it looks, what it is. He talked for about 12 minutes. I let him go without interrupting because I wanted the complete version before I responded. Here is what he told me. He and Diane had reconnected in the fall of 2022 after her divorce from Robert. It started as dinners, he said, checking in. Then something shifted. He said he knew it was complicated. He said he'd been trying to find the right moment to tell me. He said he loved her and had for a long time and that he was sorry I found out this way. He did not address the $200,000 until I asked directly. Marcus, I said, was the house for Diane? A longer pause this time. Yes, sir. Was she already living in it when I wired the money? The pause this time was the longest yet. She moved in the weekend after closing. I let that land. So when you called me, I said very carefully, and told me you were buying a house for a proposal for a woman named Sasha, you were buying a house for your mother, my ex-wife, and you'd already planned the proposal. I didn't know how to tell you, so you lied to me instead. He didn't answer. $200,000, I said. The number had a weight to it I hadn't expected, not just the financial weight, the weight of what it represented. 34 years of kept down coffee and driven until it dies trucks and Louise calling with prime rates. 34 years of building something to pass to him someday, and he'd taken a piece of it early for this and handed it to me dressed up as something else. I'm going to need the money back by December 31st, I said, per the note. Dad? Per the note, Marcus. I hung up. Not dramatically. I just set the phone down on the porch railing and watched the bird feeder for a while. The small sparrow was back, eating without a care in the world. I almost envied him. December 31st came. No payment. January 3rd, Ray Caldwell filed. I want to be honest with you about something. I did not want to sue my son. There is no version of a father who files against his child and feels good about it. It is a terrible thing. It is the legal equivalent of admitting that the relationship has been reduced to documentation. I knew what it would cost us beyond the money. I knew it would build a wall that might never come fully down. I filed anyway. Not because of the money, although $200,000 of retirement savings is not nothing. I filed because a man who lies to his father's face to get what he wants, and then goes quiet when the debt comes due, is a man who needs to learn that there are people in this world who do not simply absorb his choices without consequence. I filed because if I didn't, I would be teaching him the wrong lesson for the 4th decade running. And I was done teaching him the wrong lesson. The mediation happened in February, in a conference room on the 9th floor of a building on Gay Street in downtown Knoxville. Marcus came with an attorney. I came with Ray. Diane was not present, which I thought was telling. Marcus looked tired, older than I'd seen him. There was something in his face that I recognized, the particular look of a man who has been living inside a decision that felt right in theory and is now meeting its practical weight. I felt for him. I want you to know that. I felt for him the way you feel for anyone you love when you watch them reckon with something they built crooked. We reached a settlement before noon, repayment schedule over 18 months, interest included per the original note terms, signed, witnessed, filed. When it was done, I stood up and put my jacket on. Marcus stood too. His attorney stepped discreetly away. For a moment it was just the two of us, the way it used to be at 6 a.m. before travel baseball. Just Marcus and his father in a quiet room. I'm sorry, Dad, he said. His voice was different from the phone call, lower. The boardroom finish was gone. I know you are, I said. I should have told you. Yes, you should have. I picked up my briefcase, looked at my son, this man I raised from 3 days old, this man who had my discipline and his mother's stubbornness and a capacity for compartmentalization I clearly never saw coming. Marcus, I said, I'm not walking away from you. I want you to know that. I will never walk away from you. He looked at me, eyes wet but holding. But you lied to me, I said, and you used my trust as a funding mechanism. And those two things, they need to be named before we can move past them. So I'm naming them. He nodded once, slowly. Every Sunday at 6, I said, whenever you're ready. I walked out of that conference room, took the elevator down, pushed through the glass doors onto Gay Street. The February air hit me. Cold, honest, clean. I walked to my F-150, started the engine, pulled out of downtown Knoxville into a gray winter morning. Marcus called on a Sunday in April 6:04 p.m., 4 minutes late. But he called. I picked up. We talked for 47 minutes. Not about Diane, not about the money, not about the settlement, about a project he was working on, about the junior varsity team's spring scrimmage, about a bird feeder design I'd been considering. Small things. The brick and mortar of a relationship being rebuilt, one ordinary conversation at a time. Some things can be repaired. Some things get repaired slowly, carefully, with both people showing up every Sunday, 4 minutes late sometimes, but showing up. And some things, $200,000 wired on a Thursday morning. A check to a man who said his best friend was his father, those become lessons. Expensive ones, the best kind. I drove home to Knoxville, made coffee, sat on the back porch. The sparrow was at the feeder, still eating, still unbothered. I raised my mug at him. Good for you, I said. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. These stories keep coming because you keep showing up. And around here, showing up is everything. I'll see you on the next one.